Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to try something different from the first one, and I'm going to try and keep it a little bit shorter, a little bit more brief, just to see which one feels better to watch, listen to, and I would really appreciate feedback on which form you prefer. So today I'm going to be talking about Real Quiet Like, the squad pack for Star Wars Shatterpoint, featuring General Solo, Chewie, and the Rebel Commandos. Starting off, I just want to take a quick look at their miniatures. I really like Han's. I think Chewie's is pretty good, and the Commandos look very cool. I'm a big fan of the Endor theme that they've been sticking with for these first couple Rebel releases, and I hope that we get some more Endor stuff in the future. The only thing for me is that Chewie is a little bit funky looking. I'm not a big fan of the droid arm, but it's not the worst that we've seen by far. So, starting off, we've got General Solo. He's the primary from this squad pack. He comes in at 8 squad points, 3 force, which is the most flexible standard spot to be in. I'm glad that they are bringing more 8 squad point primaries to the Rebel faction, because right now it feels like we have a lot of 7s, and I'm hoping that this will help sort of start expanding that flexibility for list building. He has 9 stamina, 3 durability, Rebel Alliance, Scoundrel, and Scout tags. 9 stamina, as usual for me, feels a little bit low on a primary, but he has access to a lot of very good defensive abilities and a ton of heals from both himself and his squad. So I think that's probably going to be fine in the long run. It's honestly, with how many abilities he has to keep him alive, he could have been fine at 8, I think. That opinion could change once we get him on the table, but for now I think he's in a pretty good spot. Rebel Alliance, Scoundrel, and Scout are all really good. Rebel Alliance obviously pairing well with Leia, Luke, Ewoks, depending on if you bring Leia or not. Scoundrel potentially pairing well with Mando or even Bad Batch, I think could be fun. And then Scout is there just in case you want to use C-3PO with Leia, make him an Ewok Scout, stuff like that. So his first ability is a tactic. It's then we'll do it real quiet like. So at the start of this unit's activation, choose another Allied Rebel Alliance character. If the chosen character's unit order card is in the order deck or in reserve, each character in this unit and the chosen unit may advance. Otherwise, each character in this unit and the chosen unit may dash. So right off the bat, this ability is great. I really like it. Free moves are excellent. Tactic moves are great. Not only does it give Han an extra move, but it also gives an out of activation move to another unit, which is excellent. For me, I think I want to use this more often on characters that are in the order deck or reserve. Generally just because I want Han to have that advance. Not necessarily because the other unit that I'm picking is the best option. For example, if I have Commandos in my order deck, but Luke has already activated, Luke could probably use a dash, but I think, generally speaking, you're going to want to go for that advance more often, even if it means picking a suboptimal choice for your other character, just so Han gets the advance. His second ability is a reactive, called Outnumbered, Not Outgunned, costs 1 force. After a character in this unit makes an attack as part of a combat action, this unit may use this ability. One character in this unit may make a 5 dice attack targeting a character in a different enemy unit. So if you've played Legion, this is very similar in feel to Gunslinger. Han is a gunslinger, so he is getting that opportunity to potentially shoot twice. This is not something I think you need to use every time that he's attacking, but it's definitely something that's going to be helpful. If you can wound 2 things during the activation or shove 2 things during the activation, it can be very powerful. This means that Han can affect potentially 3 or 4 different objectives in one activation, which is incredibly good. So I think there will be a lot of situations where you're going to want to use this, but it doesn't have to be every time. His third ability, let's keep it a little optimism here, costs 1 force, it's a reactive. When an allied unit is wounded by an enemy effect, after the effect is resolved, this unit may use this ability. If your opponent has more momentum than you, gain a momentum. So I like this ability. It feels sort of thematic. Rebels kind of fight from behind. They're sort of fighting against a big daunting empire. So I like the theme here. Basically, it's just a force for a momentum, which is not a terrible trade. Sometimes it could help you win struggles, win games pretty easily. But once again, it's not an ability that I think you're going to want to use every chance that you get, just in very specific scenarios where it's going to have a greater effect on the outcome of the struggle or game as a whole. And then his fourth and last ability is his identity ability called Hey, It's Me. Once per turn, when an enemy unit becomes wounded after the effect is resolved, remove one condition from this unit. Then one character in this unit may dash. So the first part here, really good. Han gets to remove a condition, so strain or pin more than likely, and then he gets a dash. So he is going to be moving all over the place, especially once we get a look at his stance cards in a little bit here. The second part is once per turn, when an allied unit is wounded by an enemy character, after the effect is resolved, one character in this unit may make a 5-dice attack targeting the enemy character that caused the effect. So, this second part is also pretty good. It means that Han is going to be doing a lot of shooting, which is excellent when we get a look at his stances. And it means that he could shoot, 4, 5, 6 times in a single deck refresh just because of he can get 2 during his activation. So if you're shatter pointing him, that's 4. And then whenever an allied unit gets wounded, he gets to potentially make an attack. So he's going to be rolling a lot of dice and bouncing all over the map, which I love. I feel like it's kind of thematic for him as a gunslinger and a sort of hot shot, and I really, really like it. Your enemy is going to be wounding your characters anyway, so this ability is just pure profit. And since it's a identity ability, not a reactive, it's not going to get in the way of other reactives. It's never going to cost anything, so it's purely good. It's just very helpful. The only thing is it does take a little bit of setup because he doesn't get a move before that 5-die attack, and he's range 4, so you just have to be within range 4, hopefully. If you're not, it's not the end of the world, but if you are, you get to do that little 5-die attack. So very good. Overall, his abilities are excellent. I think you don't need to use his 2 reactives all that often, but when you do, they should be very, very helpful. Moving to his stance cards, the first one is called Gunslinger. He starts with 7 attack dice at range 4, 6 in melee, and then 5 defense dice for both. That's a really good, solid base to start off with. His ranged attack expertise is excellent. Not only does he get a crit, at least 1 crit at every level, but it maintains a 1-to-1 ratio or better of expertise to results until you roll 5 expertise, which is not going to happen very often. So if you're rolling 1 to 4, you're always going to get at least 1 to 4 results or better, which is very, very good, very powerful. And I think it's going to really improve his overall offensive output. His melee expertise is also pretty good. It's just identical to his first 2 levels of his ranged expertise. So once again, crit at every level, 1-to-1 ratio until 4 or more. So very good. He probably doesn't want to be punching as much, but he can hold his own in melee if you need him to. Defensively, his chart is a little interesting. There are no blocks, but I'm not 100% sure on the math here. He doesn't have access to deflect, and so far, no units give allies access to deflect. So, as it stands, a strike to fail, like he has abundantly on his chart, is pretty much identical to just showing a block. It's not exactly the same, but it's basically the same. So you can sort of read it as a block at 1, a block at 2 to 3, and then 2 blocks at 4+, in addition to a crit to a fail at 2 to 3, and a crit to a fail at 4 or more. So overall, fairly good. I think if they were just blocks, that would be okay. But I do sort of like the lucky dodge theming of this defensive chart. Moving on to his attack tree. It's pretty simple, straightforward, not a lot of options here. It tops out at 8 damage, which is not bad at all. He can get an expose with 8 damage and a shove with 8 damage, or if you go on the bottom route, he can do 7 damage with 2 shoves and a reposition. So for me, I'm probably going to be going on that bottom route more often than not, just because 2 shoves and a reposition in addition to the 7 damage is a lot better than 8 with just an expose and shove, in my opinion. The other big thing for me here is that he has a shove on 2, which is very, very good. Early shoves make offensive capabilities a lot better for a ton of units, and the fact that he's got one on 2 and then a reposition on 3 and then another shove on 4 makes him potentially very potent in combat, not only with wounding but with displacing and moving. So his second stance, Smug Scoundrel, starts with 6 attack dice at range 4, 6 in melee, 5 defense dice at range, and 6 in melee. So a little bit different, but not a whole lot different. It sort of feels like they want to lean a little more into the melee stuff here, but I think overall he still wants to be shooting more often than not, especially once we look at his ranged attack expertise, which once again, generating crits at every level, and only crits at every level, which is very good, makes him potentially very consistent. However, he does lose that fabled 1-to-1 ratio if you're rolling 3 or more, which is fine, because 3 crits at 4 or more is probably more useful than 2 crits and 2 strikes. But it's so dependent on how you roll and how your opponent rolls overall that it's sort of hard to quantify without being on the table. But I do think that expertise is good. His melee expertise is also quite good. It's similar. He's getting, once again, a crit at every level. At 2 to 3, he's getting a strike and a reposition. And then 4 or more, he's getting 2 crits, a strike, and a reposition. So overall, really good. Repositions on attack are excellent, especially when you pair it with his abilities that are going to be moving him and his combat tree, which is going to be moving him. He is going to be a slippery, slippery guy. He's potentially able to bounce all over the map. His defensive expertise is the exact same as before. Once again, interesting. I think overall it's going to be fine in the long run, especially once we get a look at Chewie. The combat tree here is a lot less straightforward, a lot more options than his previous one, but a lot of very good options. So this one is topping out, I believe, at 7 damage if you go the top route. But the big things here are that it has a lot more effects and conditions than the previous one. So let's take a look at that top row. He starts off with a pin and a shove on 1, which is incredible. Shoves on 1 are very good. Pins on 1, very good. So even if you're just getting 1 success and you're picking that option, you're not doing any damage, which feels a little bit bad, but shove and pin is very nice. Almost probably more useful than 1 or 2 damage that other things would have. His second choice is a disarm and a damage. It's fine. I don't see myself starting there all that often. The only reason I feel like I might start in that middle row is just if I have the 5 successes that I need to go right, down, up, down to get the 3 shoves. Now, that route, he's only doing 3 damage, but he's also doing a disarm, 3 heals, and a reposition with 3 shoves. So I think that's probably the best route to take if you're getting 5 successes. But of course, it depends on the state of the table and the game and what you need to meet your win conditions. Third row is also pretty good. 1 damage expose is solid. Once again, I think only under specific circumstances am I going to be starting on this row, and that's if I need heals. If you go the full route, and that's right, up, down, he can do up to 5 heals. So, like I said at the beginning, that 9 stamina feels a little bit low until you look at his stances and see that he could heal up to 5 times on attack, and that's in addition to an expose, 2 shoves, a reposition, and 3 damage. So this stance is pretty good. I think overall you have a lot of really good options for it, and I think that it's going to make him feel very flexible and very useful in almost every game that you bring him in. So, moving on to the next unit, we've got Chewie. Chewie is the secondary unit for this pack. He's a 4-point secondary with 0 force. He's got 12 stamina, 2 durability, Rebel Alliance Scoundrel, and Scout keywords. 12 stamina is insane on a secondary. This is great. And my first read on this was that I saw the 12 stamina and I expected that his defenses would be very bad to make up for having such a big health pool. But that is not really the case. So he is defending very well. He has a lot of stamina. He's likely never going to leave the board, which I love. And it's sort of thematic for this big fuzzball monster. Looking at his tags, same thing as Han. Rebel Alliance, good when paired with other rebels. Scoundrel, good when paired with other scoundrels. And then Scout means that he is going to be a top choice, if not my first choice, in Ewok lists with Leia Chirpa or Leia Logray. Him becoming an Ewok Scout means Logray can do things with him, and 3PO can do things with him. I think there's another person that can, but I can't remember off the top of my head. So very good overall. His first ability, Tactic, Wookiee Loyalty. At the start of this unit's activation, each character in this unit may dash toward an allied primary character. If, at the end of this movement, this character is within 3 of the chosen character, that character gains Hunker, and each character in this unit may heal. That's a lot of ifs and thens, so let's just break it down a little bit basically. Chewie gets a move towards a primary character. If he gets close enough, that primary character gets a Hunker, and Chewie gets a heal. So pretty straightforward when you think about it that way. I think in general you're going to want to aim for ending that movement within 2 because of his future abilities. So overall, very good. Once again, free moves, tactic moves are very good. Giving a Hunker to a primary is excellent, especially when you pair it with his third ability, which we'll get to in a second. And then, once again, that heal on his 12 stamina, or if you want to heal something nearby, very good. Potentially super helpful. I like it a lot. His second ability is an active ability. It's not wise to upset a Wookiee. Costs 1 force. Choose an enemy unit within 3 in line of sight. Roll 5 attack dice. The chosen unit suffers damage for each crit or strike result in the roll. So we've seen abilities like this a lot. Django's not so fast. It's on Wrecker. There's somebody else that has one, but I can't remember off the top of my head. Very good. A damage that circumvents defenses and avoids defensive abilities and rolls are very good. And his is the least limiting of all the ones that we've seen so far. He doesn't, the person you're targeting doesn't have to be contesting. It doesn't have to be the beginning of their activation. They just have to be within 3 in line of sight. So, super easy. I could see using this potentially almost every time he goes. I don't think you have to use it every time he goes, but it's a very, very good ability. So, his third ability is an innate ability called Bodyguard. It's allied primary characters within 2 and allied secondary characters within 2 of a character in this unit have cover 1. So, we've seen this on Sabe. Very good, very helpful. Cover 1 on things, especially things that you're giving a Hunker to at the beginning of your activation, means they're potentially getting cover 2 or more. Excellent overall. It also does not specify other allied secondary characters, so Chewie is in fact giving himself cover 1 always. Once again, it makes that 12 stamina feel a lot better. So no downside here. This is part of the reason why I think you want to end within 2 off of Wookiee loyalty if you can, just so that you can give that cover to that primary unit. His fourth and last ability is an innate called Intimidating Presence. While this unit is wounded, allied Rebel Alliance characters within 2 add expertise to their defense rolls. This is good. This is also very good. Once again, it does not say other allied Rebel Alliance characters, so Chewie is always adding an expertise to his defense rolls as long as he's not wounded. Once again, it's within 2, just like Bodyguard, so Wookiee loyalty, you're probably wanting to see if you can get within 2 of that primary character. If not, just always being within 2 of a primary character. It makes him and them very difficult to kill. The other big thing about this ability is that because of the timing that you would add that expertise to their roll, it expose does not affect it. So you're going to roll any expertise that you roll off of that initial roll will get removed due to expose, and then you would add this expertise, but by the time you add this, the expose has already taken effect. So it's pretty much immune to expose. Very good, very powerful. And it means that, for example, let's look at Han. He's always, as long as he's within 2 of Chewie, he's always going to be getting at least 1 strike to fail. So very good. It's going to keep things alive. And I really like the theme of him as a bodyguard for all of his buddies. It makes him feel a lot like a Rebel Sabe, which I love. Moving on to his stance, it's called Disarming. He starts with 6 attack dice at range 5, 7 in melee, and then 5 defense dice for both. That's pretty good base. I would say that 6 feels a little bit low, but it's not the end of the world because he really does not seem like he wants to be an offensive powerhouse. He's there for support, but he can still pull his weight in combat if you need him to. His ranged expertise is fine. 2 strikes at 1 is solid. I do still feel like maybe 1 crit would be better, but I'm not sure on the math there. And then 2 crits at 2 or more is great. Simple, straightforward, and I think overall I'm going to make him feel pretty consistent. So, his melee expertise. It's pretty solid. He's getting a crit and a strike at every level, which is great. At 4, he's getting a block to a fail. At 5, he's getting 2 blocks to fails. As we saw with Iden and her gang, these blocks to fails are good. They're definitely not bad, but they are not as good as just generating a strike. So overall, this chart is okay. I do find it a little bit weird that you don't move until you're rolling 4. The first level being 1 of 3 means that's where you're going to be most of the time. A crit and a strike is not bad, but I do feel like it's a little bit unfortunate or on the weaker side that you're not moving levels until 4 or more. But overall, I think that expertise chart is fairly good. As is his defensive expertise chart, which is quite good actually. 1 to 2, block and heal. 3, block, strike to fail, heal, and then 4 or more is a block, crit to fail, and a heal. So that first level, block and heal, is solid, especially when you remember that Intimidating Presence, as long as he's not wounded, is going to be, he's always going to get at least that additional block and heal. Always. So, really solid. He's never, it's impossible for him to completely whiff a defensive roll. He will always have at least 1 block. So, that's kind of helpful. The heal is also very helpful. The 3 level is fine. Once again, as we talked about with Han, that strike to fail can pretty much be read as a block. So it's basically 2 blocks and a heal, which, once again, very good, helpful. And then that 4 level being a block, a crit to a fail, and a heal is excellent. Overall, I think his defensive chart is great. Having a heal at every level is super good. That 12 HP, again, is going to feel like a lot more than 12 once you take account for all of this defensive stuff that he has access to. Moving to his combat tree, it's quite good. once again, he's got a shove on 1, so that's an excellent start. This tree tops out at a potential of 6 damage, which is not bad. That's off of 4 successes, and you can do that with 2 shoves. So that's pretty good. That's not bad for a secondary, especially when you remember it's not wise to upset a Wookiee. So he can still potentially pump out upwards of 11 damage during his activation. That top row is also really good. 1 shove, expose, strain, disarm, in addition to 5 damage is probably better than 6 damage, just because loading stuff up with conditions is generally more helpful in the long run than damaging them. And he can do 3 conditions right there off of 4 successes. So that's solid. That's quite good. And then his last column being 3 heals, once again, that 12 HP is going to feel like a lot more than 12 when he is getting heals like this left and right. So overall, I think Chewie is great. I think he's going to be in pretty much every single Rebel list I am building. Overall, I love him, and I cannot wait to get him on the table. So moving on to the last unit in this squad, we've got the Rebel Commandos. So they are the supporting unit. They also are 4 points cost, 0 force, as normal. They've got 8 stamina, 2 durability, Rebel Alliance, Scout, and Trooper tags. So off the bat, that 8 stamina is actually pretty good. I think they would have been fine at 7, so I'm quite happy that they have 8. As we've seen with Han and Chewie, this squad has a ton of access to heals and defensive abilities, so once again, that 8 is going to feel like a lot more on the table, which is great. It means they should be able to stay unwounded for a lot of the game, unless something like Vader or Maul shows up out of nowhere and just wounds them in one swing, which is certainly possible. As far as their tags go, once again, Rebel Alliance and Scout, both very good. Good in Rebel lists, good in Ewok lists, and then Trooper is solid. I'm not sure there's anything that Trooper interacts with in the Rebel faction at the moment, but I'm sure there will be in the future. Their first ability is an active ability called Commando Doctrines, costs 1 force. Each character in this unit may dash. If 1 or more characters end this movement within 4 of an enemy character, this unit immediately makes a focus action and gains Hunker. So this feels a lot like that sort of covert ops defensive maneuver run and gun type ability, where you're spending that force, you're getting a move, and then you get a secondary effect. So just like covert ops, they get that move, and then they get 2 more effects, but there's the additional stipulation of needing to end that movement within 4 of an enemy character. Overall, I think that's a fair trade-off. I really like this ability. That focus is going to make them feel a lot more consistent in combat, and so is that Hunker, especially when they are going to potentially be adding that expertise from Chewie, and they potentially will have Hunkers from other things. I think overall that ability is great and something that you should consider using a lot of the time, but once again, don't need to use it every time. They've got Coordinate Fire Damage. We know how this one works. It's a reactive. Republic Commandos have it. Padme has something similar. It's good. It's not the best Coordinate Fire. It's actually probably the worst, but it's still good. It's still potentially helpful. I don't think personally it's worth going out of your way to set it up, but if you are coincidentally within range to use it and you don't have any other reactives to use at the same time, then there's no downside. Once they're wounded and it would cost a force, I think it's probably never worth it to use it. So it's all right. Moving on to their third ability, Camouflage. At the end of setup, this unit may gain Hunker. So we've seen this on Ewoks. It's okay on Ewoks. It's not crazy helpful, but there's no downside. So that's fine. But on them, it's actually a lot more helpful because of their fourth ability, Infiltration. When deploying characters in this unit, characters may be placed within 3 of the first place character from that squad's primary unit instead of the normal 1. So we saw this on Pawns. Similarly, we saw this on the Imperial Special Forces, it's potentially very, very good. However, with Rebel Commandos, they have slightly better ways to make use of it because of camouflage. So if you're sticking them out very far from your primary units, trying to contest further objectives, you are at risk with Imperial Special Forces and clone troopers with pawns of them getting wounded very early on, due to stuff that can like move, shoot, or sprint towards them and wound them like Vader. It's dangerous, and it's still dangerous with the Rebel Commandos. I don't think you always want to be placing them as far forward as possible. It really depends on the matchup and the terrain and the objective set that you're playing. But they get that hunker at the end of setup, so they're a little bit safer than the other two units that have this so far. They will have cover if you keep them within 2 of Chewie. They can get that extra expertise. So overall, I think it's good. I like the flexibility of being able to place them a little bit farther forward if I need to, but I don't think you need to be launching them very far forward every single time. Moving to their stance, it's called Commando Training. They start with 7 attack dice at range 5, 6 in melee, and then 5 defense dice for ranged and 4 for melee. Really solid base, especially if you're using Commando Doctrines. They're going to be throwing 8 or 7, so not bad. And their ranged expertise is okay. It doesn't need to be great. They're a supporting unit. A strike at 1 is fine. 2 strikes at 2 to 3 is okay. And then a crit and 2 strikes at 4 or more is also fine. Only getting that crit at 4 or more is a little bit rough, but I feel like they generate enough strikes that it's probably okay. They're also pretty defensively solid, so I feel like if they're lacking a little bit on their offense, that's okay in general. Their melee attack expertise is fine. A strike and damage at 1 to 2 is okay, and then a crit, a strike, and a damage at 3 or more is also okay. That extra damage is cool, but I still feel like I'd probably prefer to see an extra strike in there instead, or maybe a heal. I'm not sure. They don't really want to be punching. Just keep them shooting if you can, but if they do end up in melee for some reason, they can do some work, which is good. Their defensive expertise is simple: block at 1 to 2, and then a block and a reposition at 3. That reposition is very good. It's going to add to their already mobile nature. This whole box is just going to be potentially very mobile, bouncing all around the board, which I feel like is super thematic for the Commandos and Han. And you remember, if they're within 2 of Chewie, they're always going to be getting at least that 1 block. So that's super helpful. They are incapable of whiffing on a roll if they're close enough to Chewie. So overall, pretty good defenses, pretty good expertise charts. Let's move on to their combat tree. So it starts off with a pin and a damage, which is fine. Pin is my favorite condition, so I'm happy to see it on 1 here. The biggest thing is going to be that shove on 2. Shoves on 2 are very good. And then a shove on 3 as well. So 3 successes feels like it's not that tall of an order. So they can be potentially double shoving, double damaging in a pin pretty often, which I think is fairly good. Their damage output is also pretty respectable. They can put out upwards of 7 damage, so definitely not bad. They also have access to disarm, reposition, and up to 3 heals. So once again, just like with Han and Chewie, they've got heals for days. They are gonna potentially be difficult to get damage to stick on them, which I love. Super defensive, decently offensive, actually, when you consider that 7 damage is generally on the high end for supports. And then they've got that reposition. So again, moving all over the place, healing all over the place, and doing a respectable amount of damage while they do so. Overall, I think Commandos are great. I am very excited to get them on the table. I think right now they are the best for cost support for Rebels, probably the best support overall for Rebels. I wish I could take two of them, but obviously you can't. I think they're gonna probably find their way into a lot of Rebel lists that I make, especially if I've got Chewie in there as well. So overall, this box looks great. Everything in this squad is good. I am pleasantly surprised that nothing feels like a weak link. Nothing feels like something I am itching to replace. And all of the miniatures look great, and I'm very excited to paint them. I think this box is going to provide a lot of utility for Rebel list building for the near and far future, and I am very, very excited to get them on the table. Thank you for watching. Peace.